Ray Kyritsi from the Center for Conflict Resolution, talking about a very important topic, whether it's over Zoom, in the courtroom, with coworkers, which is conflict resolution and conflict management. So without further ado, Ray Kyritsi.
Thanks so much, Brent. Hi, everyone. Give me just a second to get my screen share up and running. Whoop. There's a lot I don't want to share today. Give me just 1 second here. There we go. And there we are. Does that work? I got it. Yeah, I got a nod from Brent. Okay, great. So everyone, I want to thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here with you. Usually, of course, we're all in one big old auditorium looking at each other's faces. And I know that you're all there, but of course, now that I've screen shared, there's like 2 of you, right? So if you have a question or you need something, feel free to hop in on the chat, right? And then I think, do you, Brent, are we set up for responses, like hand raising and things like that?
Yep, all of that works if people do it.
Great. I will be doing my best, and hopefully you might be backing me up on some of that stuff. Overall, I want to say to you all, congratulations for joining the PILI program. I was a law student at Loyola about 10 years ago, and my only regret from law school is that I didn't do PILI. I think it was like literally the only thing now that if I'd done it, probably might have advanced my career and connected me to a different kind of community. So good on you that you got out in front of that. I think that you're going to really, no matter what your experience is like, which of course is going to be wild this year, right? Like, let's be real. I think no matter what that is, like getting connected to this organization and being a part of this community is a great idea, no matter what kind of law you want to practice, no matter what kind of work you want to do. So congratulations on being selected for a placement. You should all be really proud of yourselves. And I'm so glad that you're all still here and still doing these things. Excuse me, just 1 second. I'm going to grab this phone so that it doesn't bother us in our time together. So I think I want to talk to you about conflict management in general, but first I think it's nice to let people know why I get to come in and talk to you. So I'm the programs director at the Center for Conflict Resolution. We are a nonprofit in Chicago. We are Chicago's community mediation center. So CCR provides free mediation services to anyone who wants it in any kind of case. And this kind of work is actually what I went to law school to do. I wanted to work in conflict management and dispute resolution. I'm also an adjunct faculty at Loyola University Chicago, where I teach dispute resolution and mediation and coach the international commercial arbitration team. So I see this stuff in a lot of different ways, but really for today, for our purposes, I want to take us back to basics and think about some very real conflict management skills, some of which you've definitely been introduced to before, and some of which we might put a new spin on. So I'd love, there's going to be a little group work. I'd love some participation. And so I think for some of the stuff where I usually just ask everyone to shout out, we can use the chat feature. Is that enabled here today, Brent? Okay, great. So we can use the chat feature. So, get close to a keyboard so we can see what you have to say as we get started. So just an overview, really good conflict management is all about effective communication skills. There's an excellent Key and Peele sketch that I would show here if I'd gotten permission for all the swearing. But if you have a few minutes and you want to do a little internet, it's Key and Peele, and it's a text miscommunication, right? And so essentially they're like, one of them is having a very chill day and he's sending texts like, sure, we can get together whenever, whatever. And the other person is like very excited about getting together and wants to know if they have plans. And he's like, whatever? What do you mean whatever? Right? And so it's like the tiniest little things. And I think that we all probably, if we think about it, we know that I think we know that that communication is at the center of a lot of our conflicts. And so I want to talk to you about different skills we can use to make us better at communication, to make us better at understanding what other people are trying to communicate. And I think we should also be very real about the fact that like it's going to be different this year, right? And I don't know. I mean, I think maybe some people's offices are doing soft opens. Do we know overall? I mean, is anyone right now scheduled to go into a place, or are most of you kind of like getting virtual orientations and going online? Remote for now, mostly online, remote. Yeah, a lot of remotes, right? Yeah, that makes sense. I think, I think that's going to be the way. And I think we're just like set up for yucky communication in the remote universe. So let's talk about some of these basic skills and how we can apply them and move through them. So how do you demonstrate good active listening? First of all, right, when I'm talking about active listening, I think that there's a couple of different things that I might mean. So Brent, if you don't mind, can I make you my support for now, if you wouldn't mind unmiking yourself? So and if are folks able to see both of us, right? Because you've got the little thing on the side. Can you see both me and Brent? Yes, I'm getting some thumbs ups. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Appreciate your patience with me and the tech. Okay, so Brent, if you could just, I'm just curious, like, how has this been going for you, right? You're doing the orientation virtually for the first time. How is it? Just tell me about it.
Going pretty well. There was about 60 seconds where I was on mute this morning to start everything off, which wasn't the best. But I think that we kind of overcame that hiccup and doing okay.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there. I'm going to stop you there. So that was uncomfortable to watch, right? Was I actively listening to Brent at all? No. How did that feel, my friend, who it felt bad to be rude to?
I felt unheard.
You felt unheard. Absolutely. Right? Yeah, for sure. Right? Because first time so you don't know where to look, right? Like right now, I'm looking right at your face. But of course, I'm not looking into my camera. Now I'm looking into my camera. But either way, if I start looking at my email, I think it's pretty obvious that I have checked out. And let me tell you, as a law classroom instructor, it is obvious when what a person is doing on the computer looks a whole lot more like Zappos and a whole lot less like a case. Like your face, just everything changes, right? Like you can tell when someone is kind of checked out, right? So Brent, you said you felt unheard. Anything else?
Just ignored. It was a little rude, but yeah.
Yeah, it feels, I'm a Midwesterner, it feels real disrespectful to do, right? Yeah, might as well.
Especially when you look at your phone. It felt like you were looking down. It was like, okay.
For sure. And I think we all have this. We all think we can do this like real quick. Like we all think we can like do it on the sly, right? And it's like, but what if this is amazing? And now here I am. What if I'm like, oh my gosh, Pritzker opened everything, right? Like that is suddenly way more important than what the mic was doing this morning, right? Except that like, Brent is my friend and I care about how this is going because we're doing this online orientation. So let's back it up and try again. I'm going to ask you the same question. You can answer the same or different, however you like. So Brent, tell me how the orientation is going today.
It's going pretty well. We have over 100 people here. Everyone, it seems like people are using the chat and really engaged and feeling pretty good.
How many do you usually have?
Well, we've opened it up to a bigger group. Usually orientation is just PILIs. So because it's more than PILI, there's more folks here. So
okay, awesome. So it's like you're getting to reach out to more people than we usually do.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. One of these cool advantages of like our virtual verse. Yeah. Okay. How did that feel?
Very nice. Like it was a conversation.
A conversation, right? And so, folks, if you wouldn't mind in the chat, like, what did I do this time that was a lot less icky to watch, right? Because I think it was kind of unpleasant to watch me be like not listen the first time, right? Follow-up questions, absolutely. I leaned forward, changed my body language, questions and nodding. I said cool. I'm sure I did. Right? Yeah. Yeah. I'm an okayer. I say okay a lot to let people know I'm listening. Absolutely. Yeah. Those are all examples. Can anybody think of other ways that we might demonstrate active listening? Oh yeah, right. Before I just kept saying like, but I wasn't listening to him. Yeah. I added, mirroring, absolutely. And your physical body, right? When we're in space together, it's so much easier for me to literally show you with my human body than I'm listening to you, right? I can like cross my legs towards you and lean over towards you. And it can be harder to do that with the screen. And I think that we're all kind of, and there's a ton of other great examples popping up in the chat here. Thanks everyone. I think that it can be really hard to kind of know what that sweet spot is, right? Because if I like look into my camera, I think this gets hard real fast, like it's like a whole lot of ray all like it at you, right? And so it's like kind of just trying to find that space. But I'll tell you just now, before I came to do this, I have an employee who's just having a hard time today with like the workload and working remotely. And we were on Zoom, but we actually just switched to FaceTime because it was a lot more intimate, and it was easier to have a hard conversation that way, right? So even like the tech you might choose, right? And I think that sometimes for me, having once been a preteen girl who loved the phone, sometimes I'm finding that for some of this harder stuff, I've got really good old phone skills I haven't used in about 20 something years that like, sometimes for bigger stuff, it's been a little easier for me to do the phone than to like be in this like Zoom space. So, just kind of thinking about how we demonstrate active listening when we are in the room, when we're virtual, and when we're on the phone. So I've got a list here. I think we hit a lot of these. I think you guys got actually all of them. Yeah, minimal encouragers. One of the biggest skills here that I really love is the effective use of silence. Right. So I did jump in with Brent to kind of move things along and ask other questions. And I was curious, like, is 116 a lot? Is it a small amount? Are we right? Like, what does that mean? But also one of the most incredible skills we can bring as a listener is to just be quiet. And I think for myself, I love to like help people understand what I was asking them. So I have a habit, right, of like, and I think that a lot of clever problem solvers, which is what a lot of attorneys are, how we start. I think I have a habit of sort of saying, well, Brent, how's it going? I ask you because, right, and I want to like fill the space and explain the question and like clarify, but then that doesn't give, and he might just need a little bit of space. And especially with this virtual stuff, there's these like lags. And so I think that's also a two-way street communication wise, right? Like thinking about giving people a minute, but then also making sure we're not insulted when we're getting cut off because of the tech, right? Kind of a two-way street. Yeah, so what about now? How do we ensure active listening when we're doing it remotely? And then how do we use these to our advantage? So kind of an interesting thing happened to us pretty early on. So in the mediations that we do, we have two people who are, or more, but typically two folks in a conflict. We bring them into a room with a mediator and the three of them have a conversation. So we're doing that right now in Zoom rooms. That's like how we're doing it. We're having these conversations and it's working pretty well. And we work with all different types of people in all different types of conflict. Pretty early on, we had a mother and father who were no longer in a partnership together, but are co-parenting from separate houses. And about an hour in, the dad, he was like, you know what? And he just turned off his camera. And so the mediator, you'll have to excuse me, I locked my cat in the closet. I'll be right back. Just had to be a part of it, didn't you? Okay, sorry about that. She was like sort of it's like a cabinet. She was like desperately pawing it. So sorry. So the dad, he just turned his camera off, and the mediator was like, "Oh, your camera went out," and he said, "No, I don't even want her to look at me." Right. And so the mediator was like, okay, you know what? Let's all turn our cameras off. And so she was able to like have them take a break from the pressures of looking at each other, but continue to have a pretty challenging conversation Then she had them take a break. She checked in with them. Everybody agreed to turn their cameras back on. She brought everybody back together. So like, there are some ways that I never would have even guessed where the virtualness of this might serve us for, especially in some harder stuff, conflict, things like that. One of the things that we know is really true about having hard conversations of all kinds, is that sometimes if we can have a time where we know we're going to have it, that can be to our benefit. And frankly, everybody has to schedule everything right now. Like you can't, if you're my intern, you can't walk into my office and ask me to have a hard conversation with you right now because you don't know where I'm at, right? And so that can actually be to our advantage too, is that we can be really thoughtful about what we're dedicating our time to when we're sharing space with people. So asking questions. So this was definitely, I saw this in the chat earlier, the idea of open questions versus closed questions. Typically I would make you all tell me what these are, but that's going to get very confusing very fast and fill the chat. So I'm going to tell you, right? An open question, anything, right? Literally an open question. How are things going today? Something really big. Closed questions, they tend to have more limited responses, typically yes or no, right? You want to think of like a cross-examination. So here are some general examples, right? What was your understanding of the situation? That's going to give you a pretty big answer and tell you a lot of things about the person who's speaking. Closed questions, what time was it when this happened? Noon, right? I mean, it's much more limited, right? So what I want us to do for a minute here is practice some open and closed questions. So it looks like, so this is perfect. We have an even number of folks, which I think also if there is, if there's any PILI staff on the call, you're going to get put in the shuffle too. So please play along. So I'm gonna put you into breakout rooms if I can find them. Ooh, do we have breakout rooms? Oh no.
You know what? I think that I took you off of, I think I made myself back the post to mute someone. So I can do it, or I can give you back to do it.
Can you give me back to do it?
And then I can.
So that you can play, yeah. So, okay, so you're gonna end up in pairs in the rooms. And when you do, what I'd like you to do is decide who is going to be A and who is going to be B, okay? And just decide who's A and who's B. It doesn't really mean anything. And then, oh, look at you, Tricky. Okay, so I can only, so there might be 3 people in a room. So go ahead and be, if you're, just make a team of A and a team of B. And if you're on a team, just switch off who's doing it. So I'm gonna do the blast thing to tell you what to do next. So just, I'm gonna put you in the rooms, choose who's A and who's B. You'll get an invitation in just a second, hop into that breakout room and look for the thing at the top of the screen. Okay, thanks. Okay, I think you should all be back. Is that right? Brent, I can't see you. I should make you, I don't know that you're back.
It looks like most people are back.
Most people are back. That's great. Great. So here's the thing I didn't anticipate, which I feel pretty naive about. There's about a dozen of you that aren't really here because you didn't accept the invitation to the breakout room. So they're faking it. Bad. And now we know. I got your name. So I didn't anticipate that. So now we've all learned a little something. Also, another pro tip on Zoom, you know how you can message privately? I don't know if you know this, but the host, if they get a transcript of their event, they also get everything that goes in the chat, including what you message privately. So don't, just be really cool about that. Just a good pro tip while we're out there in the world making the best of ourselves. So for some of you, I think maybe didn't end up with a partner, and I appreciate everyone being a little patient with us there. But so overall, right, in debriefing it, you know, what I want to talk to you about is that in theory, right, I said, find out as much as you can about somebody's childhood. So typically if we're in a big room and I was calling on you to tell me things, you know, what we hear is that A usually asks a lot of questions. When you're supposed to do a closed question, it's a lot of questions. I think I was asked like 5 or 6 questions. And so for those of you that were B, that were on the receiving end of a lot of questions, how did that feel? You can chat or shout out. Awkward, yeah. Definitely. I think it's awkward on both sides. Aggressive, for sure. Yeah, like a deposition. That's exactly right. Super limiting. Yeah. So I was asked, oh yeah, for sure. It feels like you're just making an assumption about someone by asking the closed questions. Yeah. And for me, so I got asked if I had siblings, right? But so I'm my father's youngest child. I'm my mother's oldest child, and I'm my parents' only child. What's my birth order? What's the answer to like, were you the oldest? Like, it depends, right? That can be really limiting in a way, right? And then I think there's another, it was awkward on both sides. You sort of run out of questions. But then the inverse, right? If you're B and you're asking those open questions, at first, I think that can feel a lot more liberating because you get to ask about whatever you want, right? But then I think it has its own challenges because you want to stay there with them and ask them questions about that thing they're telling you about. But it's really hard to do that in an open way, right? It's hard to be like, what was your childhood like? And then they tell you something, right? Like, I was an avid horseback rider. And then you can't ask the more specific questions that your instinct is around, right? And so thinking about how we're asking questions and the impact our question asking is having on the listener is huge. A lot of you are going to be doing some client intake, maybe over the phone, maybe virtually, maybe eventually in person this summer, but in your careers, definitely. And like knowing what kinds of questions you're asking and being thoughtful about how you're engaging in them can go a long way towards making sure you get the information you really want. There's also something that's very real about this exercise, which is the question that I choose to ask you actually tells you quite a bit about me. Because a question that I always ask in this, when I get to play it, is, how many parents did you have? Now, what do you know about me? I probably didn't have 2 parents, right? I probably didn't have a traditional, what we saw on sitcoms forever, mom, dad, right? Like, or else I might not ask outside the norm. Another great example, I was doing this exercise about a year ago, and the woman I was working with, she asked me, did you go to a co-ed high school? And I was like, what a wild, yeah, of course I did. But what do I know about her? She probably didn't, right? Because it's part of her framework. And so it's also important to note when we're asking questions, whether it's to get information, to try to figure out what's going on, to maybe resolve a conflict, or even around like what's expected of me in this assignment, that when we are asking questions, the things we choose to ask about can sometimes be just as telling as if we're the person who's doing the answering. It's just a good thing to keep in mind. I'm going to move us on to another good skill here. Well, if the computer will play, here we go. And so overall, you need them both. That's the point. You need them both. With just one, you're stuck either way, right? So summarization. So a couple people noted that I did this when I was doing a good job active listening and I wasn't being rude earlier, right? So when we summarize, right, we do that. It gives us a couple of different, there's a couple different reasons why we might summarize, but I'm going to highlight a few of them here. So when I summarize, I can focus you back, right? So if I say, tell me about your internship, and you start telling me about a lot of things, but what I really want to know is like, what kind of law do they practice, right? I can repeat back to you some of the parts that I'm most interested in. Oh, so you're doing disability law, right? Like that can kind of tell you as a cue for me, the listener, that's where I want you to focus. When you summarize what someone is saying, it really helps them feel heard. it can be really effective. You can also overuse it and make things weird, right? It's very easy to do if you just keep repeating back to someone. But when you do summarize effectively, it can build rapport and trust, show that you understand someone. It can also check your understanding, right? So if someone's saying, you know, I want you to write, look, I'm a supervisor of externs and fellows and interns, and I have many times very poorly communicated an assignment. It's so easy to do. I'm like, so I'd like you to do some research on this and write me a memo. And if you could have it to me by the end of the month, that would be great. But I also need it on Wednesday. Right? So like, that's hard. Like, when is that due? Right? Is that due at the end of the month, or is it due on Wednesday? Right? And so you could ask me that as a question, or you could summarize it back and say, I heard you say that you wanted it on Wednesday, but I also thought I heard you say you wanted it at the end of the month. And then I can hear that I gave you 2 pieces of information, right? A lot of the time when people are saying things that kind of feel outlandish to us, it's also probably that we're just misunderstanding them a little bit. And so summarizing back can do a nice job of clarifying what's going on and confirming your understanding as well. It can review it says review progress here, by which we mean like of a whole conversation, right? Or a whole dialogue that you're in. Or if you're let's say you're doing intake with a client, right? And they're maybe like struggling or feeling really frustrated, or they don't understand why you're asking them so many questions, right? Like that, even if you're asking open questions, if you're just sitting with someone asking question after question after question, I think you get that deposition experience being on the receiving end. Taking it a minute to sort of summarize everything that's happening, to do a grand summary, which summarizes a lot of content in just a few sentences, can be really effective. And then summarizing also helps you pull together different pieces of information so that you can use them effectively. And then also lets you move on, right? So if I need to know exactly when something occurred, asking you, when did this thing happen will get me that info, but it's not going to make us friends. If I'm able to ask you some bigger questions, let you tell me what's important to you, and then ask closed questions and summarize what's been important to you to move me the information I need, you might be much more forthcoming with me, and we're going to have a more productive dialogue. This is also really effective if we're in, frankly, a hard conversation, right? So if we're having a conflict, it can be really effective for me to say, okay, I just want to check in because it seems like you're saying this and I'm saying this, and it feels like that's not working. So what do we need to do to move forward? Or am I understanding you? Something like that. So that, that's how that kind of a thing can work. And there's a couple other skills that also help us do that really well. When we're doing summarization, there's 3 different ways to do it. There's actually a 4th way that isn't on here that I want to talk about first, which is the idea of reframing. So to restate is what we generally think of as paraphrasing. So I'm just going to take what you said and say it back to you, right? Like, she's always late. Okay, she's always late, or she's not on time, right? That's a restatement. I'm going to give it back to you. But to reframe it is to try to figure out what's important about the thing that got said and give that back. So that if someone says to me, she's always late, the reframe on that is, so her being on time is important for you. Talking about that value of her being on time, about what's important to you, as opposed to what you don't like that's happening somewhere else, that can be much more effective towards a solution, right? If you're working on a project with another intern and they're missing all the deadlines, like she's missing all the deadlines, great, that doesn't get us very far. I need her work to be turned in on time so that I can turn my work in on time. That we can work with, right? That like just seems easier to honor. And frankly, it's the kind of approach that when you bring it to someone can make them a lot less defensive, right? And then, well, reflecting is particular towards emotions, and we're going to talk about emotions in another minute. And then the grand summary I talked about a second ago. So when we're talking about emotions broadly, this is where A misunderstanding can often become something that looks a whole lot more like a conflict or a fight, and can be the kind of thing that we hold on to later. So we know the science tells us absolutely, and I'm super not a scientist, but we know from science, from research, that when the part of my brain that gets emotional is lit up and active, it is really hard and sometimes impossible for me to engage the part of my brain that I need to make a good decision, to deal make, to negotiate, to be clear, right? And I think we have all had this kind of experience where our emotions were maybe overrunning what we were actually trying to do. I always think about being in a situation with someone where you're kind of like in a fight, and like some people get really hot, some people get really cold, right? Some people get flooded by emotions and like either shut down or yell, right? We all have a lot of different ways that we express it, but you can absolutely be in a fight with someone and have them say to you, you know what, I'd never really thought about it like that. And then your response is, and another thing, right? Like you're up, you're amped, you're in it. It's too hard to just to be like, oh, you're ready to be reasonable and have discourse. Like if you're having a feeling like, and it's taking over, it's probably taking over. And so a way to work with someone and yourself, frankly, when this kind of thing is happening, is to both acknowledge and explore emotions, okay? So acknowledging an emotion is used to diffuse the resistance that's attached to the emotion and remove the obstacles to conversation. So that's as simple as me saying, it sounds like you're really angry, or you seem very sad about this. You know, and that's all that is. It's really just naming it. You're not valuing it, you're not making an assessment of kind, but just really acknowledging for someone that something emotional is happening for them. That can be really powerful to be on the receiving end of. It's also very powerful to be able to do for yourself, right? Where you're like, why can't I solve this? Why can't I fix this? This happens to me, I think, when the computer isn't working the way it's supposed to, right? I tend to get like pretty pissed pretty fast. And I'm like, who are you mad at, right? Like it's a robot, but just restart it, you know? But when the emotion is taking over, it's hard to remember that like, I can probably just restart the computer and things will be fine. Sometimes though, that's not enough. Sometimes the emotion is really driving the conflict, or driving the what's happening for someone, or slowing them down from doing the heavy lifting of having a hard conversation. And so exploring an emotion can be a great way to move someone through what's happening. So sometimes by exploring an emotional response that someone is having to something, so I'm really, really mad that she is late. I'm really mad about it. If we kind of explore the anger that I'm feeling, right? We might take that anger apart and just, if you could in the chat real quick, like what might be driving my anger? What could be like my need or my interest or the value? Like what might be making me feel so angry about someone being late all the time? That I value professionalism. That's a great one. Yeah, absolutely. My time's not respected, the impact on my work. A lot of you have got not respecting time, not honoring time. Yeah. Yep. Oh, a pattern of other people outside of this scenario not respecting my time. Absolutely. If I have an employee for 5 years that's chronically late, and it's like our beef all the time, and it's like a perpetual tiny conflict that she and I are in, and now you're new and you're late, you might be getting the weight of all of that. Absolutely. Thinking about getting the work done, consistency, right? And also some fairness. If I've got to be on time, you've got to be on time. Respect. Those are huge conversations that kind of have nothing to do with someone else's punctuality, right? This is all about like my values, what's important to me. And is there a very real reason why this person is 5 minutes late? And what's late, right? That's a good question too. If I'm using this example for you, she's always late. And I tell you, like, I'm an earth sign. It's 9:02, she's late, right? That's a big deal for me. How reasonable is that? Is that the same as it's 9:30 and she's late? right? Oh yeah, and Diana has posted if you're on time, you're late, right? Which is a reference to 5 minutes early is on time is late, and late is unacceptable, right? But I think that that kind of thing is really worth thinking about, right? Like what's driving me, what's driving the other person. And I think that in particular, you know, one of the things that is worth thinking about, like the position that you might find yourself in particular this summer with this placement, you are probably not going to be supervising a lot of folks, and you're going to have a supervisor who I promise you is doing their job in a whole new way and has found a whole new host of stressors and might not have all the patience and compassion and space that they would love to give you right? And they might be short with you, right? Or they might, or something like that. And so being able to just have some space to figure out for yourself, even if you're not in dialogue with someone else, like what else might that be about, can be really impactful. And can also help us just simply not take things personally so that we're not responding as if we're in a conflict when we're sometimes not. My mother and I are always in a conflict that she doesn't know about because of her behavior on Facebook, right? Like I really don't like what my mom posts on Facebook, and so I've hidden her. But then sometimes for some reason I go and look, right? And so then I'm having this hugely emotional response to my mother, right? We move in very different political spheres. We have very different ideas about a lot of things. And so now I'm in this whole huge conflict with her. She doesn't know anything about it. She sends me a text message. Are you going to come visit this weekend? I have to be really careful I don't respond as if we're in a fight because she doesn't know we're in a fight, right? And those kinds of things I think can be really real for us when we're working in and around and thinking about our emotions and how they impact all of our communications, not just our conflicts. There's a lot of different ways to recognize when someone is having an emotional experience that is impeding their ability to dialogue. A lot of people repeat themselves. That can be a big thing. When someone's repeating themselves, I actually think the best thing to do, if particularly like in a mediation, if I hear someone say the same thing 3 times, my first thing is to repeat it back to them identically, right? Don't reframe it, don't restate it. Maybe they feel like I'm trying to minimize or neutralize them, to just say it right back to them. You hate that she's always late. Give them their exact language back. But if they repeat themselves a 4th time, I like to tell someone that they're repeating themselves in order to ask them what it is they think that I don't understand. So I'll say, I've heard you say that you're angry that she's always late 4 times. And I want to make sure that I understand what's important to you about that. And so I just wanted to take a second and see, what is it about that I might not be getting, right? And because sometimes we get stuck, we don't realize we're repeating ourselves. We're just stuck in this one space. When people are having an emotion, their tone of voice will change, their pacing, their facial expressions, and their posture, some of which is quite a bit harder to access in this medium. So there's just all kinds of things to be keeping in mind. So I have this little video here, and I have not done this before. So I'm going to see if this will work. Oh, are you going to work? Let's see. But can you all see this? Or are you still on the screen?
I think you have to share your screen again.
I have to share this particular screen? Okay.
Mm-hmm. And there's a button to press to say like you're sharing a video to use your sound. There's like an optimized video.
Thank you so much. Oh, look at you all showed up real quick. Oh, the host has disabled participant screen sharing.
Sorry.
Damn. I just can't keep this hour long.
There you go.
All right, thank you. And then there's one that says video, eh? Oh, I just clicked share computer sound, right? Is that the
Yep, that'll work.
That's the deal? Okay, great. Let me do this one. Share computer sound. Share. All right. Are you all seeing YouTube now?
Yep.
Fantastic.
It's just, there's all this pressure, And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me. And I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head. And it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there.
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing.
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
See, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See, you're
out.
not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just, sometimes it's like, there's this achy, I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
That sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Oh, come on. If you would just.
Don't.
Okay, so let me, oh, I don't even know where that is, so I have to find it. Okay, so, right, she's saying it's not about the nail. And for him, I think it's pretty obvious, right? That it's about the nail. I think we've all been in that conversation, right? At some point with someone where you were like, it's pretty obvious to me what your problem is, right? But she really, really, really didn't want that to be what was acknowledged, right? So what's happening for her? Why is that what's happening? Any thoughts? If you want to raise hand, we could do that too. It's a little fuller. I love when she says all my sweaters are snagged, all of them, just like as if she can't figure out what's going on. Can I reframe my question? Yes, I can. So yeah, maybe she's not ready to address the nail. So my question is like, what's happening for her in this, right? Why if it's so obvious to us what's wrong, why does she need this other thing? Right. So yeah, some great stuff in here. It's about something else. She might want to vent she might want to vent without searching for a solution, right? Sometimes we just want to have a feeling, right? She wants her feeling to be recognized. There's a moment when, even though he's totally insincere, he says, that must be really hard for you. And she's like, thank you, right? Like that, it's so clear that that's what she wants, right? That's what she needs. There's a whole lot of recognition and validation in the language that you all put in the chat too. Yeah, absolutely. That's totally it. And I think it can be really, really frustrating if you're looking at the woman with the nail to do that other thing when it's so obvious to you how to solve it, right? And I think what else is really important sometimes when we're talking about conflict or we're talking about people in conflict or in a hard conversation is that sometimes my solution, my obvious, brilliant, super clever solution to your problem isn't actually that great of a solution if it doesn't get you what you need, right? So I know that I'm close on time. So I just want to grab a couple of languages, some choices that you can use for your language in how to acknowledge emotions. So these are great examples of ways to do it without sounding patronizing. Sometimes this can feel really insincere if we don't do it a lot, right? Like he didn't seem sincere at all, but frankly, that it was still good enough for her. So sometimes, you know, the language can be sufficient. And then exploring an emotion is really just asking open questions in and around the emotion that you've identified through acknowledgement. I want to tell you really quick that the Center for Conflict Resolution, which is where I work, we offer internships and externships, and we do trainings of all kinds. We train people to be mediators. We train people in conflict resolution. We have a difficult conversations workshop that's super cool. And if you're attending law school in the Chicagoland area, your law school might even have a clinic placement opportunity with us. If you're interested more in conflict and conflict resolution, mediation, or dispute resolution, I'm happy to be a resource to you. I hope that you have a wonderful summer. And if you have questions, you can feel free to contact me. My email address is up here, and Brent Page has it as well. And I think 229. Got it.
Perfect. So if anyone has one question for Ray in the chat, we could do it. But if not, we'll go to our panel. But look at all the thanks. And I've been saying the like muted applause, everyone giving me muted
Oh,
applause.
that's so nice. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you
yes.
so much. Yeah, everyone looks like a seal. Yeah. Great. Thank you all so much. I really do. I hope you have a wonderful summer. Like, what a wild time to be alive and learning. And frankly, you're all going to be way better attorneys for having weathered this place, you know, as part of your education. So congratulations again to all of you, and I hope you enjoy the panel. Thanks for having me, Brent. I'll see you on the internet soon.
Thanks, Ray.